Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear. There's a few more people joining us, I see. You're very welcome this morning. My name is Hilary Copeland. I'm Acting Director at the Irish Writers Centre. You are very welcome to this information session on the Literature Project Award presented by the Irish Writers Centre and Words Ireland. I'm going to introduce our guests today. We have Sarah Bannon, Head of Literature at Arts Council. We have Danny Gill and we have Brendan McAvilly from Words Ireland. And this morning, Sarah is going to present to us, talk to us through the Literature Project Award. And there is a chance to ask Sarah some questions immediately afterwards. And then we're going to hear from Danny and hear from Brendan, both who have with some insider tips on the Project Award. And there's another chance to ask questions to Brendan, Danny and Sarah after that as well. So please do put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And if you would put the name of who you're directing your question to as well, that would be really helpful. So I will hand it over to you, Sarah, if you like.
Great. Okay. I'm hopeful everyone can hear me. And what I'm going to do now, I have a presentation, so I'm going to share my screen so you can see it. So hold on 2 ticks. And I'm doing that, but let's start the slideshow. There we go. So good morning. My name is Sarah Bannon. I'm the head of literature here at the Arts Council, here in my home, but also in the Arts Council's offices in Marion Square, and we are the National Development Agency for the Arts, but I'm sure you already know that. And I'm here to talk to you today about the Literature Project Award, and then as a kind of little extra, I snuck this in as well. We have a new award, a Professional Development Award, which was just introduced, just opened for applications on the 13th of August. And I just wanted to talk to you guys about that as well, because I presume there are a lot of individual writers or illustrators here, or artists of any sort, and I thought you might be interested in that. So it's just a couple slides. And as Hilary says, feel free to ask questions in the little box below, and then when I'm done kind of going through this, we can pick up all those questions. So I'll just start out. So yeah, so we are running a Literature Project Award. We haven't run a project award in literature for, I think, about 10 years. There was a move about a decade ago to kind of streamline all of the Arts Council's awards, so we were offering fewer, and just to make it easier for applicants to kind of streamline all of our processes. But I suppose things change, the priorities of the Arts Council evolve, and the project award that we've run across a number of different art forms, predominantly in the performing arts, has meant that we saw a need to reintroduce this year. The other reason we've reintroduced it, people may be aware that the Arts Council approached government early on in the pandemic and said that we needed more support for artists and arts organizations, and we got an additional 25 million to spend by the end of this year to support artists and arts organizations, to stabilize the sector, but also to give more work to artists and to make more work available to audiences. So one of the actions from that additional money was to broaden all of our awards. So we're offering a project award across all of our art forms. We're expanding the Literature Bursary Award, we're expanding our Commissions Award, and we're introducing a couple other awards, one of which is the Professional Development Award. But anyway, we're here to talk about the Literature Project Award. It has a closing date of Thursday, the 10th of September at 5:30 p.m. And my colleagues, Audrey and Aoife, who work with me in literature, said if you can communicate one thing to this group of people, is that if you're in any way interested in applying for the Project Award, if you haven't already, please register on our online services website today. All of the information I'm presenting today is available on our website in the funding section. It's very easy to navigate, but in order to make an application to the Arts Council, you have to be registered on the online system. You will get an email from us saying it can take up to 5 days for your registration to come through. I will say from my experience, it's usually quicker than that, but we give ourselves that window. So if you're interested, today is the day. Please make sure that you're registering, because there's often a backlog, and we're running a lot more awards now than we would have normally at this time of year. Oh no, I don't know how to go back. I'm gonna have to go all the way through and start again, guys, because I am a literature person, not a techno person. So start from the beginning. Sorry about that.
all good.
This is the nice thing about these Zoom things is I can't see like 85 people being like, oh, what's wrong with her? Anyway, so the purpose of this award is to support projects that connect literature with readers and audiences, and support projects that allow writers and illustrators to research, develop, and create work in new and innovative ways. I suppose we designed this to be very, very broad and to incorporate all sorts of things that writers might want to do, all sorts of things that literary organizations might want to do to get people connecting with work, and then also to support writers who might want to make work in a new way. Maybe you wanted to work on an experimental novel with a number of writers. Maybe you want to develop a podcast program. Maybe you want to run a series of events. So that's what this is. That's what this is designed for. Now, what it is, it's a little bit different than it's distinguished from the Literature Bursary Award, which a lot of you may be familiar with. So that is a very kind of, in my view, kind of pure award, which is really just about the Arts Council investing in the individual writer or illustrator to develop a piece of work, and we just hand money to people and say, go off and develop your practice and work on your work. This is a little bit different. The idea with the project is that it would have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there would be some kind of outcome, and that you would be finishing a piece of work or developing a piece of work, and there would be some kind of endpoint to it. It is also distinguished from some of our arts grant funding, which we offer. Now there's a little bit of overlap with that, but it's distinguished from that, and that arts grant funding might be for the ongoing cost of an organization to, say you're a publisher, and so your ongoing publishing program that's going to be renewed on an annual basis, or you're a journal and you're going to be bringing out 4 issues a year, you know, into the long term. That's really more what arts grant funding is for. Projects is for something that you say, and I say it might be a series of events, but you would kind of see an end to that. So that's the idea. What I will say is this is a new award. There's a certain amount of overlap, as I say, with our other awards, and we're trying to be as broad, as open, and as flexible as possible. And I think I mentioned to Brendan and Hillary yesterday when we were doing a trial run for this, when we were devising the guidelines for this, we wanted to put, but there's no way to kind of put this in kind of official speak, but, you know, and we're also open to anything else that you can think of. So we really want people to kind of think big and to think imaginatively about ways that literature can be brought to audiences and ways that literature can be made. And you can apply for up to €20,000. So who can apply? Professional artists, and in our guidelines we have a definition of what we think a professional artist is. Some people have trouble with this this kind of term, but it's really someone who is considered by their peers or recognized in some kind of way of being an artist. Now, we don't expect that people would be making their full income from their writing or from their artwork, but that you would be recognized in some quarters. So for a writer, it might mean that you've like published a thing. It might mean that you have some kind of qualification. Again, internally, this isn't the kind of language we use in our guidelines, but we usually just say you kind of need to have done something. So again, we're pretty broad about that, but you need to be kind of working in the field. Groups of artists can apply. The money will go to one person's bank account, but it's a group can apply. And then organizations who are working in literature. So it could be publishers, journals, festivals, art centers, libraries, bookshops, anyone kind of working in the area who wants to, as I say, connect literature with audiences or readers. So who can't apply? So if you're in receipt of one of our grant programs, so that's just strategic funding, art center funding, or partnership funding, or arts grant funding. There are some other funding programs that are more like schemes. There's a festival investment scheme, and so organizations in receipt of that would still be eligible to apply for this. But the kind of main grant programs, and the idea behind that is that you make those are kind of more of our recurring funding relationships, and the idea is that those organizations should be able to build in projects into their applications every year. This is about kind of generating new activity and kind of additionality within the sector. Individuals, organizations who don't have a track record, so again, that thing of like, you need to have done something. If you're an artist and you're in undergraduate or postgraduate education, you can't apply. And those who have applied for Arts Grant Funding 2021, so we're considering those applications at the moment. So anyone who's applied for that can't apply for projects. Okay. Again, this is all in the guidelines. I'm not bringing anything new. So also you can't apply as both an individual and as part of an organization. So I can't apply as Sarah Bannon, the writer, and then also apply in a role in the, say, or to the Irish Writers Centre. So you just are making one application, and you can't make an application for this award and apply for strategic funding. So you're going to go onto the online services thing as soon as you're done with this session. And in online services, you'll get a copy of the application form, but you will have already read the guidelines through and through. So you have to fill out an application form, which asks you some very basic questions about what your idea is, who you're going to be working with, and there's a budget. And then you have to submit that application form and some required supporting material. And this is really important. This is one of the reasons why people are often ineligible for our grants, is that they don't include the required supporting material. So you need to, supporting material is the application form itself. CVs, so your CV as a writer, and then CVs of other people that might be working with you as part of the project, or your, if it's not a CV, a biography or a kind of information about the organization. A detailed budget. So there's a very basic budget template in the application form, but we want you to get into a bit more detail. Samples of previous work, so something that gives us a sense of, you know, work that you've done before, either as a writer, and something similar really to what you're applying for, even if it's a departure, but something that would give us a sense. And we're quite open about what that could be. That could be writing samples, it could be YouTube links, it could be images, it could be any number of things, but whatever you think is, you know, the artwork that is going to help us understand what it is you're trying to do. And then there are two things that you only supply if relevant. So a dissemination plan. So that means like kind of either a marketing plan, or if you're a publisher, how you're going to distribute your book. So some plan about how it's going to reach audiences. And then if you're working with other organizations, memorandums of understanding, or MOUs as we call them. So if your project is reliant on working with maybe a network of bookshops, we need to have some kind of evidence that you have agreement from those bookshops that you would actually work together if you're successful. So the MOU might be just a letter, or we have a kind of a template on our website as well of what an MOU might look like, but it's just basically like, yeah, we had this conversation, just so we know you're not making it up, which of course you would never do. So the applications come into us in the Arts Council, and they're assessed against criteria. So there are 3 criteria, which are artistic merit, and we have a long description of how we define artistic merit within the guidelines themselves. But you know, it looks at things like track record, it looks like the ambition, it looks at the originality, you know, how it connects with either readers or audiences, how it might move the art form on, all of those things. And it looks at track record and also potential. So if you don't have a long track record, don't worry about it. If the samples that you've provided kind of prove that you have a really interesting artistic ambition, that will work. The second is how they meet the objectives and priorities of the award. So is this going to connect readers and audiences, or is it going to enable you to create literature in new ways? And then the final one is feasibility. And a lot of times, like with the bursary award, feasibility is kind of a less relevant criteria, because usually, you know, I want to take time to work on my book. It's almost always feasible. I think for the project, this is where the budget is really important. And I also think, given this like bizarre moment in time that we're living in, so you're making applications now for projects that might begin in November. It's very hard to know what the public health guidance will be, you know, November onwards. So I think you'll need, if this involves any kind of live event or involves any kind of engagement with audiences, I think you need to show, you know, as you would, that you've kind of brought those considerations to bear in your planning. And it might even be that you have a couple of different options for how your project might go, because I think that's what a lot of arts organizations are planning at the moment. So those are the 3 criteria that we use to assess the applications. And I'll talk just in a second about how that works. But, you know, we initially, when we're doing our shortlisting, we do a little narrative against each of those criteria, and then decide whether we shortlist or don't shortlist awards. And we usually shortlist about 1/3 of the applications we receive. So yeah, as I say, the assessment process. The first thing that happens is the applications come into the Arts Council. We check them eligibility. So we make sure that your application came in on time. And unfortunately, even the way the IT system, I've worked in the Arts Council long enough that we used to take hard copy applications, and there used to always be a point at like 5:31 p.m. where people would be banging on the door saying, can we please put our application in? The online system removes that human element, so they just won't accept applications after the time. And I will say that there's a high demand on the system in the last hour before closing date. So if you really want this and if you're really serious about it, pretend maybe like the closing date is the previous day. Just give yourself plenty of time to get it through, because those things it's really heartbreaking to talk to people who have put a lot of work into applications and they've missed the deadline just because they've missed the deadline. Or the other thing that often happens, as I say, is that people haven't submitted required supporting material, or they've submitted, instead of their CV, a letter to their child's school or something. So just to double check all of those things. And again, that's just all about time. And it is, as I say, it is really heartbreaking when we talk to people, because there's really nothing we can do about that, because it leaves us open to appeal, and we take quite a firm line on the closing dates. So we do the eligibility check, and that's just make sure the supporting material is there, that you meet the basic eligibility requirement. And then we do shortlisting. So the applications go to our 2 literature advisors, and they also sometimes work with some subcontractors as well, depending on the volume of applications. But the English language literature advisor in literature is Declan Hughes, and the Irish language literature advisor is Peter Sir. As I say, Declan particularly because we get a very high volume of applications in English language literature. He often subcontracts to other people, so he's worked with people, poets and children's writers, just to broaden our expertise. So we do a shortlisting, and then we put together a peer panel. So again, on our website, you'll see there's a section where we talk about our assessment processes, and there is a long list of all the people who have agreed to be part of our peer panel system. We bring in usually 3 or 4 people to sit on a peer panel, and when I'm putting those panels together, we try to have expertise that matches the applications that we have. So if you have children's writing there, you want to make sure you have someone from that field. If there's poetry, if there's live events, and so it's usually a mixture there. It's always different panels. We try not to repeat the same people over and over again, just that there's plenty of diversity of expertise. So those people get access to all of the applications online. They get access to the shortlisting comments and all the supporting material, and they're able to review all of that. And they come to a meeting. The meeting used to be in person in the Arts Council's buildings. Now it's done in this way. But we go through the applications one by one. It's chaired by a member of the Arts Council who doesn't have a vote unless there's like a tie or someone has a conflict of interest. I'm just there to provide, to make sure we're following the processes and that the objectives are being kept in mind and all of that. And they go through the applications one by one, discuss them against the criteria, and then at the end of the meeting, they score the applications. Each application receives a score of an A, B, C, or D. A is must fund, C is should fund, C is could fund, and D is not a priority for this award. Each of those letters has a numerical value. So if you got 4 A's, you get a 40. If you got 4 B's, you get a 32, and so on. And then we take this Excel sheet of scores and then rank them from highest score down, and then we try to award people what they've asked for until the budget runs out, and there's some kind of discussion around, maybe there's an element of the project that you want to support, or maybe not. But in general, the principle for the Arts Council is to ensure that we are awarding people what they've asked for. Something I should have mentioned actually when we got to criteria, and I think Brendan will probably bring it up too. The Arts Council has 2 new policies that we launched just last year. One is paying the artist, and the other is our equality, human rights, and diversity policy. And those are both mentioned in the guidelines. So if you're involving artists in your application, which you undoubtedly will be, we'll be looking to make sure that those people are your budget reflects that they're going to be paid. And I suppose That's where we would often have a very hard line about not recommending something for shortlisting or not recommending something for funding if the fees are very low or if they're not existent or if it looks like it hasn't been looked at. That's kind of a red line for the Arts Council because we're trying to improve practice and trying to encourage people to adopt good practices. In addition, with your fees, I think you should probably show some evidence that you have worked with or you have gotten advice about how to set those fees. So maybe you've gotten advice from the Writers' Centre or Words Ireland, but that you would demonstrate in some way in your application that you have sought that advice as well. So that could be the narrative of your application. Equally, the equality, human rights, and diversity policy. We're just looking to make sure that people. So if you're a publisher, we want to see that you have submission policies that encourage maybe marginalized voices or encourage diversity, or that you're kind of looking at these areas. So just two things to bear in mind. I mean, this is €20,000. It's, you know, this fund, and often this is going to be from individual writers making these applications. So I wouldn't want people to think that the entire weight of these policies sit on your shoulders. But I suppose from our point of view too, we're trying to improve practice in both these areas. So we want people to be bearing those things in mind, and no doubt you already are. So decisions will be issued in November. And I will say, so those will, barring some kind of miracle, those will probably still be issued by email. And we can tell individuals that once you've gotten your decision, you can come back to us for feedback. And I would certainly encourage you to do that. We offer that as a matter of course, so you'll get to see what the comments were about your application, whether you were shortlisted or not, you know, what the panel said about your application and so on. And it just gives people a sense of how the process works. And we really encourage people to do that. If you are awarded funding, you can get your funding in 2 installments, and the final installment is awarded after you submit a report form, which is really more about your experience at the Arts Council and how you found the service and how you found the award and if it met your expectations, etc. We don't ask for like the finished project at the end of it. It's a different kind of metric because again, like the levels of funding, while significant, are not of the level that we would be requiring that kind of. So it's quite light, I suppose, the reporting is compared to some of our other funding programs, as Hilary and Brendan can attest to. So now I just wanted to say a couple of things before I hand over for your questions, but just we have this new professional development award, which is up on our website now. We introduced this, as I say, just a few weeks ago. It replaces what people might be familiar with, which was the Travel and Training Award, and that was for travel and training opportunities abroad. So for obvious reasons, we are not running that scheme at the moment. So we introduced this instead. So it's a light touch award, that's what we call it. And so individual artists can apply for up to €3,000 for creative development support. So if you want to do a workshop, a course, a masterclass, a residency, research, coaching, mentoring, or something around career development. So if you wanted to look at, you know, developing your presentation skills or budgeting or financial or any kind of course or something like that, you can apply to this award for that. I will say this award says this, and so does the project award. We expect all of the applications, I mentioned this kind of previously, will take into account the public health guidance at the time. Like, I mean, obviously we're not in a position to be like monitoring people's activities. That's like not our role, but we would expect people to be proposing support things like this that could actually happen within the restrictions that we're living with at the moment. So your workshops might be online, the mentoring might be online, the residency would be within Ireland, and so on. So you have to submit an application form, which is quite light, a CV or a biography, 1 to 3 samples of your own work, and then a biography or CV of the organization or the individual who would be providing a training opportunity for you. So say you were going to do a course at the Writers' Centre or do coaching with you know, a business coach or something, you would have information about that person to provide us, just so we know and we also kind of know that this is going to happen. So we do an initial assessment internally, just ourselves. We score the applications based on the criteria. It's out of 6. 6 is exceptional, 0 is insufficient, and there's different. And based on your score, you'll receive funding or not receive funding. I think it's 50% and higher will receive funding. And the decisions will be issued to you within 4 weeks. So there's no closing date for this. You can just make an application at any time, and we're just assessing them on an ongoing basis. That's how travel and training worked as well. And the idea is it's light touch. They don't go to counselor or peer panel. It's just all done internally. And yeah, we'll be encouraging people to apply for that. So then all our contact details are up on the website. Our phone numbers are there. They're like our landline numbers, but they all divert to our mobile numbers since we're still largely working from home. But this is the team: myself, Sarah, my colleague Audrey, who's the literature officer, Aoife Moynihan, who's the literature assistant. They work across a whole bunch of other teams, but they are also expert in literature. And there's also some information about the online services team on our website as well, once you get into applying. So if you have any kind of technical difficulties with your application, the online services team can help you. And that is it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I think, Hilary, you're going to, if there are questions that came through, I can see a few there.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks so much, Sarah. That was really useful. Just to check, all the guidelines and the information application form is on the website, isn't that right?
Yeah, everything is on the website. Absolutely. Yeah.
And is it possible for us to get a copy of your slides to send around to everyone who is watching today?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But I will say they're no replacement for the full guidelines. Like they're really a summary of the guidelines. So go into those because I've abbreviated things just to make it snappier for the presentation.
Absolutely. I've had a number of questions about eligibility. Okay. So I'll go through all of those together. A lot of questions, for example, one is if you apply for the Professional Development Award, can you still apply for the other award or other awards as well? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And that would, no, because they're different purposes. So once you're applying for something for a different purpose, you absolutely can. Yeah.
Great. If you have applied through Arts Grant funding, could you apply for the project award for a different project with a different group of artists?
No, you couldn't. So yeah, we just had to make a call on this. So no, and I think like next year, if we run a project award next year, we might clean some of this up. But no, no.
So if you've applied as an individual, you can't apply as a group.
Well, yes. I mean, but yeah, you probably could. Sorry, that would work. That would possibly work, but you would not want to be. You couldn't be the lead applicant. So, say I was the lead. Say I applied for Arts Grant funding for my journal, and then so I have that application live, and then I wanted to apply with a group of artists for a podcasting series or something like that. Yes, I can be part of that application, but I think you wouldn't be the lead applicant. I think that's slightly different. So an organization, absolutely not. I think as an individual, if you're going in as a group, I think that's slightly different. So you might come to me kind of directly about that, but I think, yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. That's really good to know. So let me just have a look at these. Let's see what else we have. Oh, are you skipping ahead? That's okay.
I just read one there. So anyway, go on, say.
Yeah. So I was just checking if you, is it any application to the Arts Council this year makes a person eligible? Not the case.
No. So it's really those big grant programs, and this is really more related to organizations rather than individuals. But as an individual artist, if you applied for a bursary award earlier this year, you absolutely can apply for a project award. If you received a bursary award, I might question whether or not you have time to kind of complete your project award and all of that, but you would still be eligible. So it's about those big grant programs, strategic funding, arts grant funding, arts centers, partnership, which is local authorities. So, it's those rather than the individuals. And professional development award, bursaries, projects, like potentially you could apply for all three because they're all different.
Excellent, that's great. If you have, or if you're in receipt of any kind of state allowance or benefits, what implications might there be if you were to receive an award?
I don't know. I think you'd have to be taking it up with either revenue or social welfare yourself. This would be classed as, it would be artist, if you had the artist exemption, the income would be exempt, but it is income, so it will be classed as same. I mean, I often have to write letters to maybe social welfare, that just to explain that like the grant is over, you know, that it's not an ongoing thing, so that people can then maybe sign on again or whatever. But you'd need to get advice about that, but it absolutely is income, so it's going to be counted as such.
The best thing would be any individual who's concerned about that to get in touch with themselves. We couldn't really say on an individual basis.
Yeah, and I couldn't. Yeah, and as the Arts Council, we wouldn't advise on that anyway. So we wouldn't. I wouldn't know one way or the other, and it would depend on your individual case, and it would be the agency who's providing the benefit who would be able to give you the advice on that.
Great. Okay. Can you collaborate with non-resident artists? I've seen in the guidelines that this award is for residents of Ireland or to benefit residents of Ireland, but you could collaborate with other non-residents.
Absolutely, and people often do. So yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Are there any specific types of innovative engagements that the judges are looking to fund?
No, I think we're just looking to fund innovative engagements, and we haven't appointed the panel yet in any case. So, I mean, I think, as I say, we haven't run an award like this in quite a long time. And one of the reasons why it wasn't run for such a long time is there wasn't a lot of demand for it. So I suppose what we're hoping is, like, a long time has passed and people are presenting and developing work in very different ways. So I think there'll be lots of really good proposals that will come through. But no is the answer. We're just very open and flexible about it. There'll be the next question is, how many awards will be made under the Literature Project Award? One or more? There'll be more than that. I don't have a budget yet, so I'm not sure what the scale of it will be, but I would imagine at least 10.
Okay. Who should artists look to for advice on proper fee or pay scales for artists?
So I think my hosts today, Words Ireland, have some good information around the way that they pay artists, the member organizations. So that's a place to look, and they've published that on the Words Ireland website under, I think it's pay scales for artists. They all say their rates. I think talking to festivals or the relevant resource organizations. So if you were working in children's literature, Children's Books Ireland, I would talk to them and see what the rates are. So the relevant resource organization is the best place to go. But Words Ireland has a handy page on their website. Great.
Can postgraduate students apply for the project and the Professional Development Award?
No, you can't. The idea is that if you're in postgraduate education or an undergraduate education, that's what you're doing at the moment, and it doesn't really it doesn't support you taking the break to work on this. So no, we have a hard line on that.
Okay. Can you apply with a project that has already been produced / written that you want to bring to a different platform?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's, I don't see why not. What you can't apply for is like a retrospective. You can't say, I want to publish the book, but actually in your back drawer actually have the book published already and apply for retrospective funding. But yeah, so something, the creative work is already done, and so now this is about the dissemination. I think so, yeah, that sounds good.
We had a similar question. Would the Arts Council welcome an application for a publishing project that includes contributors from other art forms?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I think we mentioned that maybe in the guidelines, or maybe not in the version that were published, but yeah, those cross art form collaborations are really interesting, and we always welcome those.
Brilliant. What can be included? Can you include a personal fee? For example, if you're editing something, can you include admin costs?
Yeah, yes, yes, and yes. And I would, I think we would encourage that as well. To, as artists, you're paying yourself for your own time. There'd be administrative costs with it, absolutely. And I think, Hilary, you mentioned something like this yesterday when we were chatting, that the administration might be from yourself or it might be for someone else, but to acknowledge that administration happens, I think is, shows feasibility. I think what we you know, what you try to do when we're assessing budgets is just to kind of look at the relationship between some of those fees too. So sometimes we receive applications where like the administration fees are really high and the artist fee is really low. So that's kind of like a red flag to us a bit, you know. So it's just about balancing those out a bit. And so I think if it's your first time developing a budget like this, maybe talking to again the relevant resource organization, that's a good idea.
Absolutely. Can more than one person apply at a time? If so, how should the application be written, in first person with reference to other participants, or all in third person?
Can more than one person apply at one time? Sorry, I don't quite understand the question.
Groups or kind of collaborative groups are eligible to apply. So I think that
yeah, they are. Yeah. So a group can absolutely apply. Yes, a group can apply. All you have to do is, and you should say like we are a collective, or we. I mean, you can write it whatever way you think makes sense to yourself, and it'll be, there's a section in the application that where you'll be listing all the people involved, and if you're a collective or if you're kind of just a group, you'd be including the CVs of all of those people. So if you have to yourself, there will be a lead artist on it. This is just purely for our administrative purposes. So we make the payment to one artist. So if you're collaborating as a group, you need to have your ducks in a row to make sure you're happy for, you know, Hillary to get all the money and distribute it to everybody. So yeah.
Absolutely. This goes on to ask about academic and artist collaborations. And should there be equal emphasis on art created and on academic work created? I mean, I would imagine the Arts Council will want to see an artistic output and support for artists.
Yeah.
Do you think so?
So there's a question here about it. So it's in academic, or I don't know if can everyone see the questions? I don't know, but anyway, but this is why my slides are lovely, but the guidelines are better because they go into more detail, and I suppose they talk about the what we mean by literature, and I suppose anything that is purely academic in nature is really not our remit. So academic and artistic collaborations, the Arts Council would not be of interest to the Arts Council, and academic collaboration, but artist collaborations absolutely would. So as I say, the definition of literary writing and the what we mean by literature in the guidelines, and we exclude academic writing or.
Yeah. There is a question here about if one has been approached as a potential panelist, can one still apply for funding? I'm not 100% sure if that person means if you've been approached to take part in a project.
Oh, yeah. So what we do is, I mean, it's quite possible that people applying for our awards are on that long panel list because it's made up of people who are from the sector. But we do not choose the panel until we have all our applications in, so that we don't have this. So I'm not asking, you know, Brendan to come sit on the panel where he's made an application. So no, absolutely. If you're, and it happens quite a lot, you know, that people who receive funding are panelists later or vice versa. But no, absolutely, you can apply.
Excellent. We've got selling tickets for a festival. As Sarah said earlier, everything that anyone's applying for, it has to be in line with the current guidelines. Unfortunately, none of us can predict what those are going to look like in October or November. So I'm not sure. Sarah, have you any further thoughts on that?
Our festival sell tickets in October. So, I mean, you won't know I mean, it depends on, I mean, maybe that's an online event this person is talking about. I don't know. But you won't have your decisions until November. I mean, we wouldn't be putting funding towards anything that happened before November. So, and I would also think that it makes it appear as if this can happen no matter what. And so you'd also need to be demonstrating that an Arts Council investment would have like some kind of added value or that. So, I mean, absolutely, we can't stop anyone from selling tickets to anything, but our funding would only kick in from November, and it couldn't fund anything that went before. It couldn't be funding any retrospective activity. It's for the future.
Brilliant. And this is into our next couple of questions. One, which is, when does the work for the project award need to be completed by? And as you just mentioned, it starts from November. So when is the deadline, Sarah?
for things to be completed. I mean, this is a little bit loose, but I would say by the end of next year, by the end of 2021, that's when you'd be drawing down your funding. But again, I mean, we're like a little bit like the bursary award. You know, we sometimes things don't. Yeah, we would be flexible enough about that. But the intention is that it would be like a year from you getting the grant. But I would think up until the end of 2021.
Brilliant. And previous work done at publishers or for literary journals, could that go towards demonstrating track record if your application is to launch a literary journal?
Absolutely, yes, it can.
Brilliant. And we touched on this earlier. Can a writer apply with an organisation to present a festival in Ireland?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
If you live outside Ireland, but and the work would happen in Ireland, can you apply? And that is in the guidelines as well. Yeah,
yes, that's a yes. So it just needs to show that it has relevance to Ireland.
Another question about postgraduate eligibility. Sarah did mention this earlier, and again, that's back in the guidelines as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about what we say. The guidelines are that if you're an undergraduate or postgraduate education, you're just not eligible for our awards as an individual.
Okay. Is it okay if you started your project thanks to receiving the COVID payment from Arts Council and you want to develop it further? Could you apply for this literature project award?
Yes, you could.
Excellent. And again, a collaboration with an organisation not in Ireland, but holding a vendor project in Ireland.
Yeah.
How do illustrators fit into the project funding? Illustrators are eligible for the project award. There's a question here about digital work and online publishing.
Oh, yeah. No, I think this is a good question. So no, absolutely. I think what we mean is, I suppose we're just trying to differentiate the Arts Council's literature interest in illustration is around children's book illustration, or actually book illustration in general, as opposed to commercial illustration or commercial graphics. But absolutely, this person asked, you absolutely can apply for digital work on like online publishing, workshops, storytelling, and prepare an illustrator. Absolutely, you can apply for that. So I'll just do.
Okay. Will there be a application for the Arts and Disability Funding Award?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I encourage you to contact my colleague Anne O'Connor, who is in charge of arts participation, and she would know the answer to that.
Can the innovative engagement be to do with the dissemination, for example, of a community publication have yet to be archived? This question is about a new output versus developing something that has been worked on previously. Don't know, Sarah, if you can comment on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'd kind of have to see the application we'd have to see the idea. So it's hard to tell before that, but I suppose we tried to be as broad as possible in the kind of things that we would encourage. So everything from traditional publications to, and I think if it isn't new work that you're maybe reaching people in new ways, we support publishers to do kind of, Tramp does that Recovered Voices series. New Island often publishes books that have been out of print and kind of, so we are interested in that, but I think you do need to make a strong case for it as well.
This is a question about coaching. You mentioned in Sarah, the Professional Development Award coaching was eligible. And this person has asked, is there a list of who you could work with? I know, and this person has pointed out, the Irish Writer Centre does have a list of mentors who we work with who are professional members. And Words Ireland obviously have the National Mentorship Scheme as well, and they work with a number of mentors. A public list, I don't think, we have information on our website of who we work with, but there's not one-stop shop for that.
No, and actually this came up in the Arts Council because I'd said, could we just even keep a list internally of people that we've worked with? And there was like a hard no on that. So we just need, I suppose, we need individuals to come to us with their ideas rather than us. Like, I think there's a danger in the Arts Council, like endorsing kind of a fixed list of consultants or coaches or anything like that for a wide variety of reasons that are well documented in my inbox now. But yeah, no, we don't have something like that. But again, I think the resource organizations would be able to give you some advice around that, or about how to connect with writers if you needed to.
Brilliant. And for the Professional Development Award, can a residency in the North be applied for? You are applying for residencies in the North.
Yeah, I think so. So long as you're, it's just about the travel restrictions, and I mean, you just need to be applying within those kind of parameters as well. But yeah.
A question here, which is regarding in the guidelines and the application form, and the bank account that their award would be paid into. Can the grant be paid into a personal account? Does it need to be a separate joint account? Any clarification on that?
No, so it needs to be, the main point here, it can be any kind of account you want it to be, but the main point is whoever makes the application, and this is important, it's got to be your name on the bank account. So if Hilary Copeland applies for the award, like our finance team will only pay something to Hilary, a bank account named Hilary Copeland, even if she's like, oh no, I really wanted to go to the Irish Writers Centre, they're like, just that's a problem. So just think about that ahead of time. So it doesn't matter if it's a personal bank account, even if you're going to be running something that is like more like an organization, but just make sure you're applying in the name you want to be paid in if you're successful.
Okay, that's good. If you're working as a group, would a project that would the kinds of images resulting, would this be something, if you're applying for a project that would be potentially self-published or distributed to bookshops, would the Arts Council be interested in that? Would the publisher be interested in that? In fact, I mean, I'm not sure I could really comment on what publishers would be interested in. Would the Arts Council support something like that?
I mean, we would support, again, we've tried to be as broad and open as possible in this, but as you'll say, like if your project has a kind of a public outcome, we'll be looking for a dissemination plan of some sort. And, there is a reason why we support a lot of, independent publishers, because they have the kind of skills and expertise to get work out to bookshops and to people. And, so I think if you're going outside of that route, you just need to prove in some way that you've thought about these things, that you have a strategy, there's a reason why you're doing it this way. You have to have a dissemination plan no matter what. So again, that's less about eligibility and more about the strength of the application.
Great. Another question here about the professional development bursary. Is that considered income?
Yeah, it probably would be, but again, that's a question to talk to your to get advice on, whether it's with revenue or the social protection.
Can the project award fund an artist in Ireland to do an international collaboration?
Yep, absolutely can. It absolutely can, yes.
If you're waiting to hear back on an application for an Arts Council bursary, can you apply for the project award with the same proposal or a variation of the same?
No, so it needs to be something different, because the bursary, I mean, the purpose of the bursary is about your own time and develop and just paying yourself to work on a project, but to work on a piece of writing. The project award is either meant about kind of collaboration or innovation as an artist, or about some kind of public outcome. So anyone who's received a bursary before will know, there's no expectation that you would even complete the writing that you've done. It's just about investing in your time. So no, and we have kind of a rule that we just never assess the same application twice as well. So it would need to be a very different proposal.
Okay. And the final question we have here is again related to payments into bank account. The bank account should be in the name of the person that is receiving.
Yeah, so you can, so I mean, you could just, it's just like, this is very technical, and it's just like you don't want to come up against the finance team in the Arts Council, or I don't. So I think, yeah, apply in your, I mean, if you write in your maiden name, your bank account's in your married name, I think you apply under your married name, but then your CV, all of that can be in your maiden name, all of that. It's just the technicality of the applicant name bit just needs to be the name on the bank account, but all the supporting material can be, I'm Sarah Bannon, my married name is Sarah Keegan, so I would apply as Sarah Keegan, that's what my bank account says, but that everything else would be Sarah Bannon within the application, and we can handle that. It's just finance that can't handle the change. So applicant name is the name of the bank account. It says that in the guidelines in a few places, I think, just because people come up against this.
I had another submitted. In the section of the website, section of application form, tell us about yourself. Is that for yourself, the person applying, or is that all of the artists involved?
Like if you're applying as a group, say, and you're like a collective and you're trying to do something, then I think describe the group. If you're applying as like leading out on a project and you're gonna maybe work with 10 writers and maybe a festival or all that, I think talk about yourself and just about yourself. But the other thing is you'll have all the space of the supporting material to put in the CVs and the narrative of so that we have a sense. It's also the tell us about yourself is just to get a sense of where a person is at in their career and if you're a collective, are you brand new, have you worked together on another project, but there's there's kind of not a wrong way to answer that one. I wouldn't worry too much.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm going to leave it there for now, and then we're going to hand over to Brendan and Danny to hear a little bit more about the projects themselves, and so people have a chance to ask questions again then later. Thank you so much, Sarah. Do stick around and we'll hear from Danny and from Brendan.
I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, folks, the floor is yours.
Brendan, do you want to go first, or will I talk?
Yeah, you fire away there, yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and I welcome this award. I'm delighted to see it. As Sarah was saying, it's been over a decade since an award like this existed for literature, and I think it's a really positive development. I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal experiences of collaboration in the last 2 years, because there might be something in that people will consider relevant to whatever they're thinking about, and then a bit about the Live network, which is the network of Arts Council supported venues that I work with around Ireland in a number of counties on behalf of Words Ireland. So in terms of innovation and collaboration, I think one of the most exciting things about the Literature Project Award is, like Sarah said, there are bursaries, but this gives us a bit more scope, I think, to think about ways to develop practice or develop certain ideas that people might have. So I know that a lot of people who are on this webinar already have their ideas together, but I think that in terms of collaboration and creative research, that's definitely something to consider. I was part of Arts Council supported research with a dancer, a filmmaker and a musician at the end of 2018. And it was around my first poetry collection, but I learned so much from that process. And that particular award at the time went to the dancer, but I was paid to be a collaborator in a room, and we did 3 weeks of research. It was absolutely invaluable to me as a writer and as a curator and just as a general artist, and was really nice to have that space. And I suppose what I would say to people on this call who are maybe considering collaboration is that theatre makers and musicians and filmmakers often have money to go into a room to make work together. And I suppose this award, I think, is potentially a platform for that, that if you have an artist that you're interested in working with, whether they're a visual artist or a filmmaker, a dancer, or that you may now have means to come together either virtually, I suppose, in the landscape that we're currently existing in, or otherwise in a socially distanced setting, to collaborate on something or develop a thought or an idea. So I think that there's loads of scope within this award for that, and I just want to encourage people to think about that. From my own experience of producing work that was collaborative as a curator, I've always noticed that writers are keen to collaborate. You know, I think as artists we're stimulated often by other art forms, and there's strong relationships between literature and other art forms, and I think there is amazing potential to find the synergies there and to find ways to develop your own practice or create a project or an offering that maybe has been in the ether for a long time that's going to be developed. So I would really encourage just anybody who's on this webinar to put forward those applications, and I think it's worth doing, even to show that there is an interest from the sector in developing those kinds of projects. On behalf of Words Ireland, I work as a Literary Audience Development Officer with a number of venues around Ireland. So I just wanted to say that if you are an applicant in the counties of Roscommon, Longford, Cavan, Tipperary, Louth, Kildare, Louth, Kildare, did I leave anyone out? And Meath, actually technically East Meath as well. If you are an artist in any of those counties, please talk to me, come and talk to me about venues in those areas, because the venues that I work with, I suppose my job is to promote literature and literary programming, to help build expertise in building relationships with writers, with publishers, with any kind of literary network. The Live Network, as a group of 6 venues, have agreed to come together to support literary tours. That also means that if you have a project or anything that would need rehearsal space, residency space, performance space, or even kind of a contact point for other artists in that area, the venues are a great source of information for that. And I suppose I am at the moment attached to 6 of them as a literary audience development officer. So if there's anyone on this call who is based in any of those counties and has a proposal in mind, please come talk to me, because there may be other resources there that you may not be aware of. And I am constantly trying to find ways for literature to be supported at venues beyond live events, and I think that studio space is massive and is often sought after, and there's some really beautiful studio spaces that could be used by people who want to meet up or do things. So if anybody is interested, my email is just danny@dannygill.com, and it's on my website, and if anyone wants to get in touch, drop me a line. I'm more than happy to collaborate. And the last thing I kind of wanted to say was, for people on the call who are festivals or organizations who might be precluded from applying as a lead applicant but maybe exploring partnership at the moment, I just really like to encourage people to think about networking in a meaningful way with this award. You know, I think especially when we're living in a COVID landscape, and festivals and events are a little bit up in the air, and the health advice, national health advice, is changing, and we don't really know where we will be next year. But I suppose any kind of project or partnership that puts money and resources in the pockets of artists, I think is a really worthwhile and great initiative. But I would just like to encourage any festivals or events who are thinking about something here to genuinely think about meaningful networking and what that might mean, and who might be a valuable partner to have on board, because it seems like from some of the questions that are coming in, they're quite specific around festivals and certain types of offerings. And what I have found from my work as a literary audience development officer is that there are partnerships within the literature sector, but also county arts offices, Creative Ireland partners in the counties. There are other people in your areas that you could potentially be talking to about joining projects. So if anyone wants to talk about any of that kind of thing, you are welcome to approach me. And I wish everyone well with their applications. I'm very personally excited to see this award and what might come out of it.
And just, can I add something? Is that okay? I just was going to say, I didn't put any slides in about this because I wasn't sure. I thought this might be more individual artists, but just Danny mentions there about organizations or festivals or any organization that has an existing funding relationship with the Arts Council. You're eligible to apply for another new award, which is the Capacity Building Support Scheme. And that is, there are kind of 5 different headings under that. But organizations can apply to develop networks or collaborations or anything like that. So the upper limit on that is €20,000, and organizations can apply individually, but also as groups as well. So just around those networks. So again, it's just, that's also on the website. It's also an ongoing award. So yeah, it just.
Thanks so much, Danny. Thanks so much, Sarah. Brendan, do you want to talk us through your experience of the Literature Project Award?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Danny and Sarah, for the information so far. Anyway, it is genuinely really exciting to see this award reintroduced. It's a great opportunity for people, for writers particularly, to get meaningful pay for projects that they are leading on and directing and conceiving of. And it's a great opportunity for writers to connect with partners or with venues or organizations that people in literature tend not to. I think maybe the big network of art centres around the country is maybe one kind of underused resource by writers, and they are let's just think about the directors in those places. They're usually people with a background in theatre or in music, and so a lot of the work they put on are in those areas. But they are genuinely keen, particularly the ones that Danny's been working with, but other art centres as well, that don't have literature in their programming. They want to receive emails from writers, and I suppose they want to receive emails with ideas that are already fully formed and ideally funded, and therefore it's great that this award is being introduced, because the project award in every other art form gives artists the opportunities to develop events or residency or workshops, and come to those directors and say, look, I have this funding, or I'm hoping to receive this funding. If I did receive the funding, would you be interested in collaborating or offering, maybe in the case of events, it might be an additional guarantee, which is kind of income that the venue says, we'll definitely give you 600, 800, $1,000 to put on this event on this particular night, no matter what the ticket sales are, so that guarantee can add to your budget and support your application. And maybe a question just for Sarah to answer later, I guess, is I'd be used to receiving letters of commitment from venues for a show that I put on with Ian Malini, and really they're just saying, yes, if we guarantee to pay you this X amount if you come to Prairie on such a date. And does that count as an MOU? Are they sort of the same thing? But just going back to sending out emails, I guess, just get in touch with your not necessarily your local art centre either, and if you're from counties outside of the list that Danny mentioned, you can be sure that your art centre is still interested in hearing your ideas, given that, for most of them, their literature programming is small or non-existent. So get in touch. I guess maybe my biggest tip or piece of advice around the project award is go to the Arts Council's Who We Funded section, add in project award, and look at all other art forms, and basically you get a 3-line description of the projects that did get funded in other art forms over the last number of years and how much they received. And I think you'll be kind of both shocked and excited at how much artists in other art forms are getting paid, and in oftentimes not to necessarily put on a number of events to tour, but to develop an idea for an event, to work with other artists, to, I suppose, like Sarah says, this isn't particularly about buying time. It's not the same as the bursary, but you can buy time to go into a room, as Danny said, if you're working on something that has an end result. So I think the end result thing is the important factor here. And a lot of kind of artists, theatre companies, music groups that are applying and receiving funding are getting kind of sums up to, and in theatre in excess of 20,000 to put on maybe 2 or 3 iterations of an event that they are developing, just to test it. So for example, there's a visual artist, Gary Coyle. He's an Ace Donna artist. He put on a show called My Magnetic North, which is kind of like a spoken word event. He developed about 6,000 words of just, they're essentially stories. He's a photographer as well, and he delivered the stories alongside kind of clicking through his photographs, and it's a really beautiful hour-long show, well conceived, well rehearsed, and he put on he had 3 iterations of that show, 3 nights in the cube space in the project theatre. Now, he would have received some funding or some income from the project art centre, sorry, for that, but he received an additional 18,000 for himself, and I suppose the producer is helping him put that on. But it works out at €6,000 an event, and when we compare that as writers with what we're used to receiving to turn up to an event, which are fees of 150, 200, maybe 300, to do unrehearsed events with kind of relatively low or non-existent production values, in comparison with, let's say, a theatre event, I guess it's shocking. But hopefully you'll kind of be excited at the possibility of, your budget should factor in not just the day you're going to be working the event, but also the admin time. And as Danny says, for potentially a number of artists, or artist plus dramaturg, or artist plus kind of sound designer or lighting designer, to work together for a couple of weeks, a month, whatever it might be. So maybe coming to pay, it's just to stick with events for the moment. I know it's not just events people are looking at, but Words Ireland kind of recommends, if you're in an art centre space, if you're a lone artist on stage, then €300 is the minimum. If you're on stage with other artists, then €200 should be the minimum. But don't limit yourself to that. And I guess if you're doing a number of events in a week, you might decide on a weekly rate, which is kind of, then look at kind of Abbey Theatre guidelines. I don't know if it's kind of €800,000 a week if you're doing, say, 3 or 4 or 5 performances in a week. But yeah, I suppose don't allow your ambition to be curtailed by what you've seen to date or what you expect from literary events, and be generous to yourself in your budgets. Pay yourselves properly in terms of the development work. It might be kind of daily rates of 150 up, but that's just going to be shooting off the hip. But I suppose it all has to add up to under 20 grand in this case, but pay yourselves fairly. Let me see. And yeah, I guess in terms of residencies, just to go back to the partners, art centres are definitely looking for writers to become residents in or around their art centres. And yeah, I've run out now. I guess. Yeah, maybe just finish up. It's great that the award allows writers to be collaborating with kind of people and artists outside of literature and organizations. So yeah, sorry, jump in there, Sarah.
Oh no, I was just gonna, because I think someone had a question there about looking at the other project awards, and that is in the who we've funded section. But just to, I think Brendan's right. I think if you are developing an event that is going to be held in a traditional theatre space, which that doesn't seem a feasible proposal at the current moment in time, so probably people aren't going to be doing that. But I think the advice that we've given for a long time is, if you're going to be doing something in an art centre space, please take on the same considerations you would if you were producing something to the level of a theatre performance. So that does have a lot more costs involved in it than the kind of traditional 2 writers and an interviewer and the cup of water. So yes, absolutely take those on. And as I say, the project award, all the decisions in relation to everything that we funded are on our website under who we funded. But I just would add just like a little word of caution around that, which is that there's a visual arts project award, there's a theatre project award, there's a music project award, there's a film project award. They all sit within their individual art forms, within the needs of those art forms, and are designed as such. So some of them have a kind of a strand which is around development, some of them have like outcomes. So a lot of theatre work these days is funded through the Theatre Project Award, so shows are actually mounted through that, so that those have kind of huge costs. But the panel who make these decisions in relation to the Literature Project Award are going to be made up of, it's going to be made up of literary expertise, you know, and maybe some with, you know, depending on the kind of composition of the proposals that we get. We've tried to craft something that suits literature rather than trying to mimic what's happening in the other art forms, if that makes sense to you, because actually we want to be broader than literature as performing arts. We want to kind of incorporate that kind of experience, but also whether it's, you know, readership initiatives, or whether it's, you know, podcasting, or whether it's say a group of writers like working online together, or workshops or residencies among one another. We wanted to incorporate all of that. So I think the picture on the website can tell you a bit, but it can't give you the full story. And we pitched this at €20,000 because we think that's a, you know, a generous budget to kind of maybe develop ideas. It's probably a little bit more like a incubation phase than some of the other project awards. So I hope that's helpful. I just have a word. I think it's a really good point Brendan makes, but I would just have it doesn't give you the full story of how those budgets are conceived, or what those are looking at. But I think Brendan's right to be ambitious.
That's great, Sarah. Thanks so much for that. And thanks, Brendan and Danny as well. There's loads of really great tips in there. If you have any questions, we have about another 10 minutes or so left before we finish up. But definitely think about, there are art centres around the country who would be interested to hear from you. Don't let sort of ideas of what you think a literature project would be. It doesn't have to be limited to an event. It doesn't have to be limited to an event in the form that you know it. And there is lots and lots of scope for collaboration. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity. It's brilliant to think about something that is available to support writers and artists in different art forms, and that you can work with libraries and with bookshops and with illustrators. There's just so much scope as well to consider. A couple of points on just that might be helpful for anybody who is not sure about maybe approaching the application form, or maybe this is your first time approaching something like this. We did an information session earlier in the summer, which is recorded and available on our YouTube channel. It is applying for bursaries, applying for awards, making an application, and we go through some advice there on how to approach an application, how to write up your CV, a few bits of advice for putting a budget together. That is maybe worth a look. It's on the Irish Writers Centre YouTube channel for anybody who is maybe just not quite sure about that. And definitely going through the guidelines really carefully, making sure that sort of what you are applying for meets the criteria of the application. This is the right award for you, because as Sarah mentioned, there are lots of different awards and opportunities around, and maybe you have an idea, but maybe this isn't the right fund. So it's always worthwhile just double checking that and making sure that the right thing is for you. And something we touched on yesterday as well, which I think is useful, is to think about where you might maybe need some additional help or some assistance. If you're looking at a project and you know you've got a brilliant idea, but maybe admin or coordination isn't your strong suit, you know, this is a great opportunity to look at engaging a freelance project manager, or somebody who can maybe would be able to help you put something together. And Danny and Brendan both mentioned theatre is sort of a good place to look for some examples. In theatres, there's executive producers and there's directors, as well as actors and stage managers. There's lots of people involved in putting something together. That can be quite helpful to look at as a framework, you know, to make sure that you're playing to your strengths as well, and getting some support and getting some help where you need it. Folks, we have a couple of questions here. Someone has asked about including other art forms in the literature project, where literature is a central focus, and we touched on that earlier, and that is something that people can look at applying for across different art forms. Absolutely. And another question, an audio performance of a podcast, would this be a fit with a theatre project or a literature project? It's quite a specific one.
Oh, I think that's definitely a literature project. I think, you know, I think if in doubt, you're probably the literature, because they'll be having a whole, they'll have a whole, they'll have a whole different set of criteria around theatre as art form, you know, and they'll be looking at it through that lens. Whereas if it's using other art forms to promote the art form of literature, we're your place.
Great. Thanks very much. I can put a link in the chat below to the Arts Council website and the who we funded section, but definitely use that as some examples rather than you know, kind of astringent. So don't restrict yourself to that, and do think about other ways that you may want to collaborate with other people, or if you've got something, an individual project that you want to put forward. Does anybody have any final thoughts? Danny, Brendan, Sarah, any top tips or pieces of advice?
Maybe just to say, if anyone wants to run a budget by me, info@wordsireland.ie, kind of happy to look over things. And if I have any doubts, I'll get on to Sarah, but you can use me as an intermediary if you like. And maybe a question for Sarah. I'm just thinking of residencies and workshops, not just with art centres, but potentially people who want to work with specific communities in the community, maybe direct provision centres or civil society organisations or groups. I've seen in other art forms residencies with kind of non-art organisations. Would that be viable if anyone is thinking along those lines?
I think, that absolutely would be. I think we included residencies there, and that would be the kind of thing we'd be looking at. I just saw there's one other in the different chat. There's another question here. If you'd like to collaborate across disciplines, maybe work with circus performers or opera producers, there's a resource or Arts Council information session that we could plug into to identify potential collaborators. There isn't an Arts Council resource as such, but there's a resource organization in almost every art form. So I think if you make that initial contact, they'll be able to point you in the right direction. And again, all those are listed on the different art form sections of our website.
Yeah, just want to throw in a quick note there just about platforms. Like if people are making any audio, you know, podcasts or anything like that, or visual stuff, that maybe we consider using platforms that are already there and partnering, just so that people lessen their costs and their admin time with that kind of stuff. Because I think there are a lot of existing platforms that have shown and are willing to show that kind of material, and yeah, that maybe people should consider that and not necessarily need to have that as a budget line in their own budget, and network a bit better with organizations who already might have a means to help you disseminate. Yeah. Sinead.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where kind of maybe partnering with someone like the Irish Writers Centre or an art centre who can kind of reduce, let's say, SoundCloud fees or whatever that might be, plus you know, bring your work to viewership, or to, you know, share the work through social media platforms that have much bigger followings than, you know, a kind of an outfit that is coming together for this one-off project. Let's say that's where partners really come in handy, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody wants to contact any of our panelists or get in touch, or also just sources of really good information, go to the Words Ireland website. You can go to the Irish Writers Centre website. Danny has her own website as well. And don't forget the Arts Council website. Not only has examples of previous different projects and awards, but loads of other info as well about funding and the different sort of art forms that they support as well. You can also look at the Irish Writers Centre website. We have a resources section as well as opportunities there as well. And if anybody has any follow-up questions, you can always email us at the Irish Writers Centre, info@writerscentre.ie, and we will be able to forward your information or your question on to anyone else who, if we can't help you, we'll be able to find somebody else who can.
Thanks, Hilary.
Okay, folks, I think we're going to finish it there. Thank you very much, Sarah, to Danny and Brendan.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time today. It was really helpful. We have Sarah's slides. We'll get those sent around to everybody as well afterwards. And thank you so much to everyone for tuning in and listening to us today. Hopefully that was really helpful. And good luck in your applications. We'd really, really encourage everybody to, if you have something that looks like it would be a good fit, definitely do put an application in. It's a really exciting opportunity. So all the best and good luck with it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody. Bye.